Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. It's a Friday, and Chris Graham and Jerry Carter with you here, getting you ready for a sports weekend, which gets off to a start early. We're recording this podcast at about 3 in the afternoon Eastern Time, and we got games with a significant local interest in about 5 hours starting. UVA-Miami football, and then the Washington Nationals NLCS Game 1 with the St. Louis Cardinals in baseball. We'll talk about those, and we'll talk about a lot more in sports. And so, Jerry, first off, how are things going for you?
It's a great day in the neighborhood out here on the island. The sun is shining, and the deck is getting built, so it's a good day. And a lot to talk about, as you mentioned. And Chris, just so it doesn't get buried in the long haul, I want to say congratulations to the Washington Mystics last night, the local folks back home, playing their first ever WNBA championship by taking Game 5. Unique fact here, Diebold, their coach, is the winningest coach in the history of the WNBA. But last night was his first title. Emma Besserman ended up becoming the MVP. They announced that Elena Deladon was actually playing through 3 injured disc in her back, came back out there, and I made the Willis Reed comment. And somebody for the Valley, a local hero, Christy Tolliver, who of course won a national championship at Maryland, added one with the World Championship last night. Kudos to the Mystics for getting it done. But Chris, that leads us to, I think the national segue there is from the Washington Mystics to your Washington Nationals. So I got to listen to some of your recap, you and Scott talking about Game 5. So tell me what you're thinking going into tonight, Game 1, and kind of a quirk in that even though the Nats had the better record, St. Louis gets the home field advantage because the Nats are a wild card. So tell me what you're thinking as the Nats have now wandered into uncharted waters.
Yeah. Uncharted waters indeed, and in fact, I didn't pay close attention to this series until this morning. I did an in-depth kind of deep dive into Nats-Cardinals just this morning because, late night on Wednesday night with the win coming after 12 o'clock Eastern time, and then kind of reveling in that until the wee hours. I'm not even sure if 4 o'clock in the morning is wee hours anymore. That's early the next day hours. So kind of a long day yesterday, recapping that the win over the Dodgers. But now looking ahead to the Cardinals, the first thing I was surprised to see. In fact, as I was starting to write my story, I had MLB Network on, and the talk was about how the Nats are favored to win this series, and it didn't register with me that that could be possible. I've been thinking as a Nats fan, Nats observer, for months, just get in the playoffs, just get the wild card, and then just win the wild card game, and then somehow beat these Dodgers. And you don't let yourself think ahead to the next round. And so I guess I assumed, even though the Nats have a 2-game better record overall this year than the Cardinals, I just assumed that they would go in as the underdog. And they're actually a slight favorite. And so that's despite the fact. So I'll caution for Nats fans out there, you're a slight favorite, but the Cardinals won 5 of the 7 games this season head-to-head. Now, 3 of the 4 came back in April when the Nats were still a terrible team. 2 of the 3 did come in September. They played a few weeks ago in the height of the pennant race. But when I started breaking it down, Jerry, what I saw was it does look favorable for the Nationals. And we can talk more about that as we go through the podcast here. But yeah, tonight the pitching matchup. If you're just looking from the Nats' perspective, you're saying, well, we got to start Anibal Sanchez, and Anibal's he's 11-8 this year. Started 0-6, thus finished 11-2, coming from I think it was late May on. But Anibal Sanchez, your number 4 starter. But the Cardinals are also starting their number 4 starter, Miles Mikolas. He was 9-14 this year, 4.16 ERA. And so sort of both teams, because they had to go 5 games in the NLDS, are having to sort of make do in Game 1 the best they can before they get their starters lined up. But I'll just say it, Jerry, the way the series kind of lays out from Game 1 on, it feels like it really favors the Nationals. So tonight's important, I think, more for the Cardinals than for the Nationals. It's a 7-game series. You can breathe a little bit. Nats lost game 1 of the NLDS to the Dodgers, and you lose a game, a game 1 of a best of 5. And your opponent thus only has to win 2 more games the rest of the way. That puts you behind the 8 ball. But I don't want to say the Nats can lose this game. They don't want you have to certainly go out there to play the win. But for the Cardinals being the home team, you've really got to win game 1 because game 2 you're going to go against Scherzer, you don't want to be down 1-0 at home going against Scherzer and then having to go on the road, even if you eke out a win there, and then having to go get Strasburg and Corbin in D.C. So big one for the Cardinals tonight, and a chance for the Nats to kind of steal game 1 and really put themselves in the driver's seat in this game tonight. So to me, that's the overarching storyline heading into game 1 is who steals game 1, and especially if the Nats win, it's a real steal on the road.
The first thing you got to think about where St. Louis is concerned, the Cardinals have a ton of history, a ton of postseason success, but this is a much different version of the teams of St. Louis in the past. You're sitting there and you can go through the history. I actually spent a few years living in St. Louis in the Whitey Herzog era, but even more recently, the people that were involved in winning the recent titles for the Cardinals are no longer a big part of the organization. So as history goes, with the Nats having just won their first playoff series as the Nats, they did advance to this level back in the strike shortened season when they were still the Expos. But don't be falling. I guess falling into the trap of thinking, these are the Cardinals. They're used to this. They've actually been through a little bit of a lull, and most of the players on this roster are going to be in the same boat as the Nats are, going into the series. And on the flip side of it, Chris, you've got the New York Yankees and the Houston Astros on to finish out the Final Four. And one of the things, Chris, and maybe you can offer us some insight on this. Now, 3 of the 4 opening round series went to Game 5. But 2 of the 3 were out of reach early. Only the Nats were able to come back and make a game of it. Do you have any thoughts on what that might have been? Again, the Atlanta one was unbelievable. St. Louis put up 10 in the first inning. And then last night, Houston jumped on Tampa Bay's starting pitcher. Do you have any insight as to what was causing the faulty starts in the Game 5s?
Well, it looks like from everything we're reading, the starter for Tampa Bay, Glasnow, who was a solid starter first 2 months of the season, missed a lot of the season with injury, came back late. He says he was tipping his pitches, and you could see actually on the broadcast early in the game, Astros hitters, it is always the case, first time through a lineup, the first hitter will go talk to the second hitter, talk to the guy in the on-deck circle, hey, look for this, look for that. There was actually some audio caught on an exchange. I can't think of the 2 Astros hitters who were talking early in the matchup last night, but one was basically signaling to how the pitcher was tipping his pitches, and and what that means for the average fan, we would not notice what we refer to as tipping pitches, but essentially, major league hitters, professional hitters are looking for whatever they can find to get a sense of what pitch is coming, because you have so little reaction time to be able to make a decision as whether to swing or not. When we hear 100-mile-an-hour fastball, we don't know what that means. That sounds really fast, and it is, but your reaction time is a split second, and you got to decide: is it a fastball? Is it up? Is it down? Is it a slider? Is it a changeup? Where is it? And so if you can find any little thing that a pitcher's doing in terms of maybe how he's holding the ball in his glove, how he's moving the ball in his glove around, if he's going to throw a curveball or a fastball. If you can, if he dips his shoulder a certain way before he throws his fastball, doesn't do it before his curveball, whatever you can find, you're looking for that because it gives you a shot. When a ball's coming at you that fast and breaking one way or the other, up or down, in and out, you're looking for whatever advantage you can get to be able to get to battle the ball in a good way. And apparently, that's what he even said after the game. Yeah, I was tipping my pitches. He said Glasnow said after the game he went to the clubhouse and actually saw on the video that he was tipping his pitches. And so he was able to correct it apparently, because he did get through the third inning. and before he handed the ball off to the bullpen. But the damage was done. It was already 4-0, and you get behind the 8 ball. I can't tell you. I mean, in the Cardinals game, it was just sometimes that happens. And in baseball in general, when you talk about the way we decide our playoffs in baseball, football's a one game. You have to, and it has to be, because you can't play a lot of football. Football's such a grueling sport physically. And even in pro basketball, they'll do a best of 7 series in each round. But in college basketball, of course, it's a one and done. But in baseball, except for the wild card round, you play best of 5 or best of 7 to decide playoffs. When it comes down to that one game, though, the elimination game, anything can happen. I heard this said on another podcast, so I can't claim authorship of it, but ever since I heard it, it makes a lot of sense. In a one-game scenario, the Baltimore Orioles, who lost 110 games or whatever it was this year, the Orioles can beat the Astros, Yankees, Cardinals, or Nats. I know they beat the Nats twice this year. So in a one-game scenario, any baseball team can beat any other baseball team in one game. And so in that context, then a 10-run first inning for the Cardinals, it's unusual, but it's not unexpected. Anything like that can happen. You can't expect anything, I guess, is the short of it in a baseball game. But the Tampa situation was more obvious. It just was a melt in the Braves Cardinals game. It was just an unfortunate meltdown by Fulton-Awitz, and you can't recover from a 10-run first inning. Nobody's going to recover from a 10-run first inning.
Yeah, you had to feel bad too for the fact that game was in Atlanta. Yeah. I mean, as a fan, if that game has to get played and it's 10-zip after half an inning, you're at least hoping it's the home team that has that lead. And I guess it would technically, in that case, be after one inning. But I felt horrible for the Atlanta Braves fans. You're sitting there, you're going, okay, you want to celebrate what your team did. You want to celebrate they made it to Game 5. But when you're down 10-zip, I don't know how many times in the history book someone's come back from that. So I thought that was a tough watch. Now, Chris, I've got an odd question for you in reference to tonight, and this is a me question. But you mentioned you got 2 big games. You've got Washington Nationals playing Game 1. You've got UVA football on the road at Miami. And if you had the good fortune to lock in a win, guaranteed win for one of the 2, which one would you rather see get the win tonight?
Well, football only plays one game a week, so it'd be the football team, and the Nats can recover from a Game 1 loss. And actually, they are both teams are actually underdogs tonight, strangely. And we'll talk more about UVA-Miami, I'm sure, in that context a little bit later on. But football is only once a week, and if you lose, that you've lost that week. The Nats, with a loss tonight, as I said earlier, you still got Scherzer, Strasburg, Corbin lined up. I don't know that tonight is a must-win for Washington. I think it kind of is for St. Louis. For UVA football, a win tonight, you're 3-0 in the ACC. You've beaten probably the 2 biggest rivals preseason anyway, Pitt and Miami. For the Coastal Division on that trek. So, yeah, it's pretty easy for me. If I had to pick one, it would be UVA football.
Okay, now you mentioned something there. I was expecting that to be the answer. It'd be the same for me. But you mentioned something there, and I'm sure you've researched it. I've just been chuckling about it. The fact that going into tonight's game, it's a situation to where UVA is listed as an underdog. The last time you and I had this conversation was the Belk Bowl last year, where we couldn't decide why it was that South Carolina was perceived to be a touchdown better than UVA. So in a week's worth of research, tell me this: have you discovered any logic to the fact that UVA is a road underdog tonight?
Yeah. I've actually, and it's. I wish it was a week's research. It was again a day's research. This week has been with starting the week with 2 games in DC, which 2 playoff games. Getting to see 2 playoff games in person, awesome. And then Game 5 on Wednesday night, and it went into early Thursday morning, half of the day Thursday. It felt like I've been catching up all week, and plus ACC Operation Basketball, trying to catch up from that from just a coverage perspective. Okay. So all that said, I spent an hour this morning, maybe an hour and a half actually this morning, diving deep into this game. And here's what I've discovered. It's not as strange as I thought when I first heard it. In fact, the first time I heard that UVA was underdog was on our podcast on Tuesday. I hadn't paid attention to the lines yet when you and I talked on Tuesday. Okay, so some reasons maybe that's the case. I kind of analytics are what the Vegas folks use. Also, ESPN's FPI, the Football Power Index. And, so analytics have a role in certainly a huge role in determining what Vegas does. Vegas isn't just going off the cuff. They're the people there trying to make money. So here's what feeds into the analytics. I looked at the last 4 recruiting classes for both schools. I could have gone to the 5th one. There are a couple of grad transfers in each side, so I didn't think that would be representative. So the last 4 recruiting classes for both sides. Miami's got 40 kids who were either 4 or 5 stars, just from the recruiting class standpoint. There's 1 transfer, so I guess if you count Tate Martell, the 3rd-string quarterback, you got 41. Virginia's got 3. All are true freshmen. Only one of them's playing. The other 2 are redshirting. So from a just pure talent standpoint, Miami has a huge just talent advantage. Then you start looking at the results this year. Miami's 2-3. Virginia's 4-1. Virginia's ranked. Miami not even close. Shouldn't be. Miami's 2 wins are Bethune-Cookman, an FCS team, and a 17-12 win over Central Michigan. So, no impressive wins. Ugly loss if you ask me. 5 turnovers losing to Virginia Tech. But when you start diving down even deeper, you look at first the Miami defense. 2nd in the ACC total defense, 256 yards a game. 2nd in rushing defense. 3rd in pass defense efficiency. The defense is doing its job to make it short there. The offense is moving the ball well. 438 yards a game. 5th in the ACC. The issue is in 2 of their 3 losses, turnovers. They lost the turnover battle to Florida, and they lost that game. They lost the turnover battle to Virginia Tech. They lost that game. You can make a quick argument and a not very hard argument that, if you just take turnovers out of the equation, this Miami team could be 4-1 or even 5-0 at this stage. They're 2-3. So on the field, they've lost 3 games. Now, certainly for Virginia, very similarly constructed team. 3rd in defense in the ACC, 3rd in total defense, 3rd against the rush, 4th against the pass. So those are very similar teams defensively. Virginia's offense not moving the ball very well. Offensive line's been an issue. But, you take away turnovers from Virginia's 1 loss this year, the loss to Notre Dame a couple weeks ago, and that's a 5-0 team. So if you factor out the turnovers, these are 2 teams that could very easily both be 5-0. If these 2 teams were both 5-0 going into tonight's game, you would say, yeah, Miami should be favored in that game. They're playing at home. If the game's in Charlottesville, Virginia would be favored. So I think that's probably the logic. That's the best I can come up with as far as the logic. And so when you look at it that way, I don't feel as bad as I did when I first heard that 4-1, number 19 Virginia is an underdog against 2-3, 0-2 in the ACC Miami.
It's going to be interesting because I am, again, assuming that Virginia is going to be able to get the job done tonight, and it's going to create a level of separation for the Hoos. It's going to give them a pretty comfortable advantage. And it also, Chris, in my mind, it's going to take Miami out of the equation. Because that's the one thing we have to look at. You play 8 games in the conference. I have to believe that 6-2 is the lowest mark that the Coastal champion is going to have. Are you going to agree with that?
I would say so, yeah. And if Virginia wins tonight, 6-2 would be 3-2 down the stretch, and they would have played already. To me, 2 of their toughest games on the road at Pitt, and if you win tonight at Miami, if you're 3-0 with those 2 pelts on your collar there or whatever, I think that 6-2 would be a come down. I think if you can win this one tonight, I think 7-1. But yeah, 6-2 as a floor there, and if that's the case, yeah, then if Miami's 0-3 and Pitt's already got a loss to Virginia, so they're 2 games behind in the race. Tech's already got a couple losses. Yeah, you win tonight, and you're really, barring unforeseen injury to a key player, you're close to punching a ticket if you win tonight if you're Virginia.
And the minimum that you do is you eliminate Miami from the conversation.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We have a number of teams that we keep thinking, well, they have to get better. And we've talked about it. We talked about Virginia Tech, and hey, they went down there and they beat Miami. which is better than having lost at home to Duke. We're not going to learn a whole lot about them this week with the game against Rhode Island. But with Miami here, if they were to lose their third straight right out the door, even if they somehow turned it around and got it to 5-3, I just don't see how 5-3 comes around to win the Coastals. I don't see that at all. And we talked about that preseason about the fact of, we want the Coastal winner to go into Charlotte at 9-3, if not better, because you want, from it. We talked about the fact that how Pitt kind of won it by default, and then when they lost in the game in Charlotte and they lost their bowl game, they actually ended up, with basically a 500 record. So with Miami, has to be looking at this, Chris, as a elimination game for them. What is the biggest concern you have, having watched the Miami-Virginia Tech game? What could Miami possibly do tonight that makes you a little uneasy in regards to the Hoos?
I'm not sure if it's Miami as much as it is Virginia. Both teams have issues on offense. Now, Miami gained 563 yards offense last week. 442 from the one quarterback, so that was close to 500 yards passing combined between the two quarterbacks. I wonder, though, how much that was. You're down 28-0, and you have to throw the ball all the time. And Virginia Tech, of course, sitting back maybe a little too casually in zones and kind of allowing them, trying to use the clock against Miami. It almost backfired. Tech almost lost that game because of that. But, so I wonder if that number is should have an asterisk beside it. But they still put 563 up against Virginia Tech defense or with total offense. So that could be a concern. But Miami is 128th in the country in terms of sacks allowed on the negative side. They give up, and there's only 130 teams in FBS. So they're the third worst team in the country protecting their quarterback. And Virginia is fifth in the country in sacks. So Virginia needs to get to the quarterback. I think I know this from the Virginia side. Virginia is not that far down on the rankings, but the loss to Notre Dame was turnovers and sacks. Actually, sacks and turnovers. Eight sacks of Bryce Perkins, 2 of them strip sacks that led directly to points. Among the 28 points off turnovers that Notre Dame scored in that game. So both these teams play top level defense. These are among the best 10 or 15 units in the country defensively. I think that's why the over-under, I'm not a big betting guy, but I just happened to see this when I was researching the story this morning. The over-under for this game is 43.5. That's three-quarters of a game for one Big 12 team. So the over-under total for this game is 43.5. They're saying, I guess, with a 1.5 point or a 2-point margin for Miami that this game will be about 23-21, something like that. So from Virginia's standpoint, and I would say the same for Miami. It's take care of the ball, but Miami's there's so much uncertainty on their side, on their offensive side of the ball. They don't know who they want to have the quarterback. You have to wonder. Kosi Perry's getting the start tonight, but you have to wonder if he struggles early, if he's going to get the hook again, and they'll go back to Williams. Maybe they go to Tate Martell finally. You just never know. Miami, that's been Miami's bugaboo for this is the fourth coach now since Larry Coker. They haven't figured out how to play quarterback. And so I don't know that stops tonight, especially against a stout Virginia defense that sacks the quarterback, that gets to the quarterback's face a lot. But what worries me about anything is as long as Virginia has not figured out its offensive line woes, that will continue to worry me. Virginia, the 8 sacks against Notre Dame, a team that had only recorded, I think it was 3 sacks in 3 games 3 sacks in 3 games leading into that loss last 2 weeks ago. So you've got to protect Perkins. You've got to have a running game. Virginia's last in the ACC in rushing yards per game, 107.6 yards per game rushing. It just can't be the case when you've got Bryce Perkins, the most athletic quarterback maybe in all of Power 5 football. You've got to run better than that. And if you can run better than that, then you can create more opportunities for that passing game, which, man, they've got some receivers. They've got Hassis Dubois. They've got Joe Reed, 2 of the best receivers in the ACC. But you got to give Perkins time to get the ball to those guys. So if Virginia can block tonight, they can win this game. It's not like they need to score 30 points to win this game. I don't think that's going to be the case. But they need to move the ball. They need to get some points on the board. They need to have ball control, keep the ball away from Miami, create a couple turnovers, and I think this is a game that Virginia should win, but those are the factors that will lead to the decision in this game.
Well, Chris, taking a quick look backwards at UVA, and you had the Old Dominion game, the Notre Dame game, and a bye week. So you're in a situation, and you never know how somebody's going to come off the bye week. Sometimes they come out, they look incredibly focused. Other times they look like you wonder what they were doing during the bye week. Is there anything in particular coming off the bye week and after those last two games that you think that Bronco might try to do tonight out of the norm, or do you think it's going to be business as usual?
I mean, I don't worry about a Bronco Mendenhall coach team lacking focus even after a bye week. I think that the bye week was probably good overall. Anytime a football team gets a bye week, except for really early in the season, some teams get saddled with that second week bye, which is just ridiculous. I guess somebody's got to take a bye, but you want to take them middle of the season, later in the season, etc. So you can kind of lick your wounds a bit, get guys healthy, get them mentally refreshed. That's an important thing too. Before the bye week last week, your training camp starts around July 20th. So from July 20th to September 28th, every day you're consumed with football. And of course, these are college kids too, so some classes as well. And so just a chance to take a couple days to get your batteries recharged was important for these guys. From a schematic standpoint, I can just bet that, especially on offense, Robert Ane, the offensive coordinator, his staff, his brain trust on the offensive side of the ball, they're working to figure out what they can do to protect the quarterback and get the running game going. I don't know what the answer is. I said this on a podcast earlier this week. I can't remember if it was with Scott or somebody else, but you're stuck with what you got. It's not like you can go pick up a free agent off the waiver wire. You can't sign somebody off your practice squad. You've got the guys in your locker room that you got, and you've got to make do with what you can, and it's not like you can also just make them bigger and stronger. I mean, that's what you do between January and July when training camp starts. You get bigger, you get faster, you get stronger in the off season. You can't do that now. You're just trying to keep yourself standing up, basically, to stage and able to go out there and do what you do. So, but schematically, they can try some things, and I just wonder, the running game hasn't really been effective. But it's not just been effective in not running the ball. I wonder about, one thing we overlook, I think, Jordan Ellis was an 1,026-yard rusher last year, but maybe just as important was he was a 2-year starter at running back, and running backs don't just run the ball. They also they play a role in the passing game, either catching the ball in the backfield. They're also important guys in blocking schemes sometimes, and so I just wonder if the fact that Virginia's so young in the running back position group that maybe that's been an issue. So maybe some focus on, whoever gets the majority of the snaps at running back. It might be as important that they're a good running back as they are a good blocking running back. Because again, you got to get the ball to Joe Reed, you got to get the ball to Jesus Dubois. Terrell Chapman is a burner. You got to get the ball to him, but you got to get time to get the ball to them. So it would not surprise me to see Virginia doing some things differently schematically. I can't tell you what that would be, but the focus has to be on figuring ways out to protect the quarterback and get the running game going. Maybe not a traditional running game. Maybe it's not a between the tackles. Let's run Wayne Talapapa up the off tackle right or up tackle left. Maybe it's get Joe Reed the ball on some pitches and in the running game. Maybe it's the effective long handoff. Maybe more screen passes that can get the ball to your speed guys. Sort of the long handoff sort of passes. And utilizing the tight ends more on short passes. If you can't block well enough to throw the ball downfield, maybe you go short and then you kind of bring the defense up and then you throw it over their heads. There's got to be something different because this offense has weapons. They just haven't shown it through 5 games.
It's going to be interesting. We talked all throughout the week about how the offenses just ran roughshod over the defenses. Last night, I don't know if you had a chance to see any of the Syracuse-NC State game. I was able to watch the majority of that. And I don't know what it was about NC State's defense, but they did a phenomenal job. In fact, they held Syracuse to a field goal up until 3 minutes to go, had a number of sacks. I want to say the number was like 7 or 8. So it could be that this week we're actually going to see the defenses step up, and the final score last night was 16-10. And with that win, as I mentioned, Tuesday, NC State, by winning that game, goes to 4-2, and you're feeling pretty good about that process. Syracuse, on the other hand, falls to 3-3, and each one of their wins has been something less than to write home about. So it's a situation to where they have some work to do, and they're having the same type of offensive line troubles as far as giving their QB a chance to hit the ball out. Now, by comparison, where Bryce is concerned, you're putting your coaching cap on just for a minute. We know how dynamic this young man is. We know what he's capable of doing. If Chris Graham was the quarterback coach for tonight, what are you telling Bryce going into the game about what he needs to do against Miami?
I don't know that it's Bryce being the issue as much as the issues with the blocking schemes or blocking. Well, not necessarily the schemes. I don't want to blame the schemes. It's more just the result. It's hard if you're Bryce Perkins. He averaged 71 yards a game rushing last year. Now some of that was scrambling yardage. Obviously, in the college game, they count sacks against the run game too. So there's a little bit of balance there. Sometimes you scramble for yards out of the passing game. Sometimes your passing game counts sacks against you. So without having broken that down all the way, let's call it sort of a wash. But he ran for 71 yards a game last year. This year, he's less than half of that. He's in the low 30s per game. So he's still the same Bryce Perkins. It's not like he's dealing with an injury. They're not trying to use him any less. It's just that, you know, in the offense that Virginia wants to run with Robert Anae, the offensive coordinator, what he's run with Bronco since they got together at BYU, and they were even assistants together at New Mexico when they first got to know each other. Bronco was a defensive guy, and Robert Anae was an offensive line coach actually there. But the offense they want to run is an offense that's sort of it's a very college offense. It's an offense with, as we see the way Bryce Perkins runs it, a shotgun, a lot of read option, a lot of RPOs, run pass options, and but you have an athletic quarterback who can thus make the defense have to defend not only a drop back pass, not only a turnaround, hand the ball off to a guy, but you also have to worry about the quarterback scrambling. So you have to stay gap responsible when you're rushing the quarterback. But you've also got to worry about the quarterback in the running game, and actually in the running game, not just scrambling, but also in the running game. And then of course what that does is gives you the ability to run some play actions off of RPOs and run read options, and you have to worry about then him taking the ball out and throwing the ball to either a quick pop pass to a receiver or further down the field if he can keep the play alive. And so at the college level, that can work. And last year we saw it work really well. After the first few games, I think Virginia started 2-2 last year. They went 6-3 down the stretch, 2 of those losses in overtime. They very easily could have won 10 games last year, and the offense was really purring. But you've got to block for the quarterback. I mean, right now what you're seeing out of Bryce Perkins in the running game, fans get frustrated. They're confused because they see a lot of plays where it's a design run for Bryce Perkins, and it looks like all they're doing is snapping a ball to him, and he's getting caught up in traffic up ahead of him. Well, these were the same plays that we were running last year, but the line was creating holes for him. And now what you're seeing is defensive linemen and linebackers are just kind of clogging those holes up, and they're able to the corners are cheating up a little bit and taking away those perimeter escape lanes, and so I think what I wouldn't talk as much to Bryce. I would talk more with Robert Anae and just kind of get his thoughts on what you do to open things up there. You've got defenses cheating right now because your line can't block well enough to allow for 5- and 7-step drops out of your quarterback. They know they're not going to get beat downfield that much. So they're cheating up on trying to take away those short pass routes. That makes things more difficult there. They're also, and that cheating up's also taking away both the inside running lanes and those escape lanes. And so, I without saying what it should be, it just feels like there's a need for sort of a fresh look at play calling and scheme. And saying all that's going to be tough to do against a Miami defense that's one of the best in the country. So I think there's a tall order tonight. But these guys have had a week and a half, basically 2 weeks, to figure out what they want to do against this Miami team, and you will see something new. The question is, will it work tonight?
Well, one of the things, and again, by mentioning Bryce, I'm not thinking in any way, shape, or form that Bryce is the issue. My concern is him remaining patient in the process and following the plan, because when you're sitting there and you have that level of skill and you see the opportunities that he can remain patient and believe that the blocking is going to get better. That would be my hope there. Now, you mentioned the Miami defense, and obviously, the average fan who's just following scoreboard saying Miami defense, they gave up how many to Virginia Tech? But as you said, these guys are skilled football players. So I guess from the mindset of trying to have, not that anybody is looking at this game from a UVA standpoint as a light game. Let's talk just for a minute about what problems the Miami defense is gonna give UVA.
Well, 42 points last week, but 334 yards, 21 points directly off turnovers. So that 42 is deceptive. It's kind of like I was saying in college football, the sacks count against the run game. That 42 looks like it's the defense, but the offense contributed mightily to that 42. The Miami defense is in a lot of ways a mirror image of the UVA defense. They don't run the same scheme, but the emphasis of both coaches is on the defensive side of the ball. And both Manny Diaz and Bronco Mendenhall. He's not his own defensive coordinator anymore. Nick Howell is, but Mendenhall's a defensive guy. They like speed. Al Groh was a defensive guy at UVA. He likes size. He was a guy who had big linemen, big linebackers, and that's how he played defense. Mendenhall loves size, just like Manny Diaz, and they fly to the ball. That you will see them. You'll see gang tackling. You'll see lots of guys making tackles, not just one guy. The Miami scheme, again, they get speed on the field, and so what they will do is they do make it hard. Now, against Virginia Tech, you didn't see it as much because that game was, because of the turnovers, it was 28-0 so early in that game. And Virginia Tech ran the ball. Virginia Tech's the first team that ran the ball effectively against this Miami team all year. Part of that was the score. Virginia Tech's wanting to run clock, and Tech ran for 147 yards. The only team that's run over 100 yards against is Miami defense all season long. So for a team that is built on speed, they are surprisingly adept at being able to take away running games, which normally you associate with those bigger, more physical teams. But the one thing this Miami defense doesn't do, like the Tech defense and like to a degree the UVA defense, is they don't create a lot of turnovers. When you're giving the ball away as much as Miami's offense is giving the ball away, it would be helpful if your defense was kind of getting it back. And of course, the turnover chain is something we associate with Miami the last few years. This year, not quite as much. In their 3 losses, they've created 2 turnovers total. While they've given up 6 turnovers, and the turnovers have thus turned against them in those 3 losses. So as good as they've been, at stopping other teams, slowing them down at least, they've not created the turnovers, and they've been playing. To be fair, they've been playing a lot against short fields because the offense has put them in disadvantageous positions. But you'll see a lot of similarities actually between these 2 defenses in terms of speed.
So one of the things, Chris, on the Miami defense is concerned, and I can't give you the number of coordinators, but with Diaz being his first year and Rick being there 2 years, that it's telling you that a 4-year player, a 4-year senior at Miami, is playing for his 3rd head coach, and I'm going to assume at least his 3rd defensive scheme. That might be a little difference in that with Diaz coming back from being the defensive guy, but not a lot of continuity there for sure, and they've been trying to overcome that. Going into, we took a quick look back at Thursday's game when NC State won. We've got the Virginia-Miami game covered. Do you want to go out on a limb and give us a prediction on this one?
Yeah, I think that Virginia wins this one, and I put it this way: after analyzing, why Vegas and ESPN's FPI would have Virginia as an underdog in this one, and it makes total sense. Again, I think these two teams are in a lot of ways mirror images. Offensive issues. Miami's are much more pronounced, but they both have great defenses. They're each a play, or in Miami's case, a few plays away from being 5-0 based on the way things have gone. The way I look at it is this: these are pretty evenly matched teams. Obviously, from what I'm saying, I look at it though I think of it this way. Maybe this is definitely the Virginia glasses, the orange and blue color glasses, looking out at this. But you've got one team that's an underachieving team. Loads of talent, but tons of questions, coming off a short week. Don't forget, they played Saturday, they're playing Friday. So that's the one side. That's Miami. On the other side, it's an overachieving team. I talked about the disparity in the star rankings, and you don't dismiss the star rankings. Some people will, but you look at the number of guys in the NFL, and most of those guys had 4 and 5 stars when they came out of high school. The job of their college coaches was not to screw them up. And so 41 4 and 5 stars for Miami, 3 for Virginia, 2 of whom are true freshmen who are redshirting. But Virginia's overachieving. And overachieving teams don't stick your nose up in the air against an overachieving team. Those overachieving teams work their butts off. So you got an overachieving team. I think they're a little peeved about blowing a chance to beat Notre Dame, and they're coming off a bye week. These are all factors. So I think I'm looking at the analytics and saying, sure, favor Miami. I'm looking at the intangibles. Virginia 24-13. I don't think that Virginia avoids the turnovers. I'm looking at a conservative game plan too. So I talked about what the question you asked about Perkins that made me talk about Robert Ane. I think I'll finally answer your question there, Jerry. What I would say to Bryce Perkins, and I would agree with you. Don't press the issue. Let's just be careful with the ball. Punts aren't bad. Field position battle, not a bad thing. Let's win the field position battle. Don't throw late over the middle. He's thrown 6 interceptions this year. He's trying to force the issue, which a quarterback will do when lanes are clogged and guys are pressing on you, and you're trying to get things going. You'll try to do some things. Don't do that tonight. If we take care of the ball, they won't take care of the ball. They're under the gun here. They got to win this game or their season's over. And so if we can just if Virginia can just get out there, take care of the ball, play defense, and sort of win this war of attrition, 24-13 Virginia.
That sounds like a good pick to me as well. I think it will be a defensive thing, and that's exactly what I would be telling Perkins is you don't have to force the issue. I think that the Virginia defense hasn't been the question throughout this process, and until Miami shows you they can do it with any kind of regularity. Now they did put up some nice stats in the back half, but again, when you're having to throw the ball each time. Chris, we touched briefly Tuesday on the other 4 ACC games, so we'll just do kind of a quick hit process. Give me your last thoughts on Rhode Island at Virginia Tech.
Why is this game being played? There's the second FCS game for Tech this year. It's what it is. But Virginia Tech probably licks its wounds a bit here. And it's a chance, positively, chance to build momentum. You beat Miami last week. Don't sneeze at that. It's a good Miami team, in my opinion, just about the turnovers. So if you do what you're supposed to do, and Rhode Island's 1-4, they're 0-3 in the CAA, you're going to do what you're supposed to do. So go out there, get some good work out of Hendon Hooker, win this game, and then go play next week.
A game that I think is going to be a fun watch. Louisville at Wake Forest. Tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah, I like Louisville. I don't know why. I mean, I can't say why, and I guess I'm not a Wake Forest hater. I'm a Wake Forest still doubter. Wake Forest wins this game, I'll probably stop being that guy. But Louisville's played well. I like what they're doing. I like what Wake's doing. I think it's going to be another game sort of like that BC Wake game. I think it's going to be a 27-24, 30-27 type game. Comes down to the fourth quarter. Should be a fun one to watch.
Florida State at Clemson. Again, the line we talked about being 4 touchdowns. I think we both agreed that's a little too high. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, it's not going to be a 4-touchdown game, in my opinion. I became a fan of the Florida State team when I saw them in Charlottesville. They're only 3-2. They're 2-1 in the ACC. Clemson's coming off a bye week after the near disaster in Chapel Hill. I think Florida State gives them a game. I don't know that Florida State wins this game. It's in Clemson. But I think Florida State makes this interesting. And, Trevor Lawrence has had some similar issues as Bryce Perkins. Those were, in my opinion, the best two quarterbacks in the ACC coming into the season. I thought Perkins was one and Lawrence was two. They're both have had issues with interceptions and had issues with accuracy, surprisingly, after solid seasons last year. So if Florida State can stay in this one into the second half, I don't know that there's not a chance of an upset here. I think Clemson pulls it out, but I think it's going to be certainly a much closer game than the odds makers think.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think it'll be another fun watch. And the last one on Saturday, and for out here, it's the breakfast game. 9:30 kickoff. You got Georgia Tech and their struggling offense coming up to Duke and playing what do you call that? The early matinee game.
Yeah, Duke. It's great timing for Duke to have this game this week. Maybe in future years when Jeff Collins gets his turned around, Georgia Tech will be back. But yeah, it's tough for Georgia Tech right now. And so Duke, chance to sort of like Virginia Tech, not as pronounced because Duke is playing an ACC team, but a chance to lick your wounds a bit and get back on the right track heading into Virginia next week.
Now I had a question I wanted to ask you because there's some other games this weekend, and I know that most of our focus is on the ACC. But when it comes to college football, Chris, the question always becomes who has the best rivalry. And you'll have people that'll say Michigan, Ohio State. Fans will say Auburn, Alabama. A number of folks will say Texas, Oklahoma. So this weekend you've got Florida, LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, and Texas, Oklahoma. In your mind, if you had a ticket to go see one college football game a year outside of the ACC, what game would it be?
Army-Navy, actually. There's none of those games. Army-Navy be the one. You've been to Army-Navy game, at least one, maybe more than one. I've never been to Army-Navy. I can't wait to go see Army-Navy. I will do that one time. And, of course, in the scheme of great games impacting the college football playoff race, that's not the game that impacts the college football playoff race. I guess if the question will be then that level game, it's lost its luster of late. Ohio State, Michigan comes to mind. Maybe the one in the Big House in the even bigger stadium. Alabama, LSU this year should be fun, assuming both those teams hold serve until that one, which I assume they will. They don't play anymore. Texas A&M used to be fun from just a watching on TV standpoint. Texas, Oklahoma had lost some of its luster in recent years because Texas has been down. It'll be interesting to see. Texas is sort of back up now, so let's see if they can be competitive in this one, which I think they can. But I'd go Army-Navy probably first. Maybe Alabama, LSU, and if I was just wish listing things, it'd be Alabama, LSU in Baton Rouge on a night, a Saturday night in Baton Rouge, 90,000 people going absolutely ballistic. That would be a pretty interesting environment to be in.
I got to admit, I have had a chance to go to a few Army-Navy games, and I wouldn't trade those memories for anything in the world. It's going to be fun. This week, I'm hoping that Florida can go down there and at least scare LSU a little bit. Chris, before we switch over to the basketball side of things, I just had one pro football question. Where this week is concerned, you've got the winless Redskins and the winless Dolphins playing in the game I'm going to call Somebody's Got to Win. If you're a fan of one of those two teams, are you wanting your team to win this game, or are you more concerned at this point with the number one draft pick?
I'm glad you asked this question because the Dolphins have been reportedly, probably pretty obviously, trying to tank, they say. I think that idea in football is just the most asinine thing. I mean, I hate the idea of tanking in any sport, but at least in basketball, if you're tanking for one guy, on the floor at one time, there's 5 guys. Most teams play 8 guys as part of their regular rotation. So one guy is really important in a basketball context. If you can get LeBron James, the 17-year-old LeBron James, if you can get the 17-year-old Kobe Bryant and lock them up for how many ever years you lock them up for, you go out there, you tank. You take it for a year. But in football, this idea that Tua Tagovailoa he's a 6'1" left-handed quarterback No offense to him. He's a talented college quarterback, but if he gets drafted number 1, you still got to have a 53-man roster. You've got a 2 deep of 44 guys. You know, so much has to go right for one guy to make a difference. And he's not Peyton Manning. He's not Tom Brady. You know, he's not a game changer at number 1. So, you know, and of course for the Redskins' sake, you know, if they got the number 1, they'd probably just trade it because they've already got a quarterback of the future in Dwayne Haskins, quote unquote quarterback of the future that they're not playing right now, but he's supposedly the quarterback of the future. So, so they would trade that and get some picks, but of course, being the Redskins, they would trade it and somehow screw that up. So I have no confidence in either franchise right now. The one franchise trying to tank, the other franchise is owned by an idiot, Daniel Snyder. So I'm rooting for a tie because it would be the most unsatisfying result possible. And so I think that both ownership groups, both front offices deserve the most just unassuming way to have this game end.
It's kind of funny because I hadn't thought of the tie element yet, but that would be a fitting end to this one. And it's kind of funny in the fact that, you know, where the Redskins are concerned, they have nowhere to go but up. And while everybody has been saying, well, it's obvious that Miami's doing it, I'm not sure that it's not obvious that the Redskins are doing it, but my understanding is that their best defensive players just chose to sit at home. So your best offensive player is Alex Smith, and he can't play.
What?
Your best defensive player stays home. I'm not sure that you had a good fighting chance in this equation, but you know, Snyder's had a long run, and I haven't seen a ton of success. So at some point, they got to look at the front office in my mind.
Well, you got to look at the ownership group. The owner is the one who hires the front office and keeps the people in place that have been making these bad decisions for years and years and years. You know, among the things that the Redskins ownership group and front office do, they're trying to extort Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. out of you know, $1 billion plus to build a new stadium when they've got a 20-year-old stadium. You know, they're trying to extort more money to, you know, hey, bring our awful football team to your place. He's at his direction, at Snyder's direction, they've always played football like it's fantasy football. Signing guys past their primes to big contracts, saddling them in the salary cap era with dead money. They don't get the basics right. You talked about, you know, guys who were sitting the season out. Trent Williams, the best offensive player on this team, is actually Trent Williams. You know, Alex Smith is never going to play football again, so forget about Alex Smith. He's done. He'll be lucky if he can walk right when he's done with his rehab. But Trent Williams, the offensive the tackle, one of the best tackles in football, maybe one of the best 2 or 3 tackles in football, sitting out this year because of medical misdiagnoses by the Redskins medical staff, and he's trying to force a trade because he doesn't trust the medical and training staff to even be able to treat the players right, and other players are sticking up for him in that. It's a train wreck, but it's been a train wreck for so long. He brought Joe Gibbs back for a couple-year run, couldn't win with Joe Gibbs. He had Steve Spurrier there, couldn't win with Steve Spurrier, couldn't win with Mike Shanahan. And you know, it's just whatever they can do to get stuff wrong, they do, and they get stuff wrong. And they're also trying to extort money out of taxpayers. And if you were successful, you could do that. We've seen other localities, other states pony up the money. Hey, we want your successful team in our place as opposed to this place. Ain't nobody giving these guys money. They don't know how to. There are more, literally, when the Redskins played the Patriots at FedEx Field this past Sunday, there were more Patriots fans and empty seats than there were Redskins fans in FedEx Field. That it's embarrassing, but it's the truth. And nobody's proud to be a Redskins fan anymore. And you know, and as long as Daniel Snyder owns his team, that will continue to be the case.
Yes, we're not going to threaten to add the Redskins to the Mystics and possibly Nats list for this year.
Anytime soon, no.
Safe bet. Chris, I got 2 left, and I think they're both in your wheelhouse. I'm going to tell you what both of them are, and then I'm going to let you pick which one you want to address first. The one is the ACC media has now come out and gave the preseason rankings. But the other is, and we talked briefly at the end earlier this week about the China thing. And to elaborate on that further, I'm reading that the NBA is planning on a salary cap hit in the area of $15 million next year if this thing with China doesn't play out the way that everybody wants it to. And that's a mind-boggling number to me. So those are the two we got left. The more on the China issue, the ACC media. Which one do you want to go at first?
Well, let's do the China one first because that's a different angle than you're hearing talked about a lot. Don't overlook the fact that the NBA and NBA Players Association have renegotiation for the collective bargaining agreement coming up. This is a cynical power play by the NBA, the owners group, the management group, to try to get an upper hand in the CBA negotiations by basically they're throwing this China thing as a reason to try to stiff the players out of more money. And don't think the players aren't going to see through this and aren't already seeing through this. And the fact that, if it ends up being the case, it's because of a tweet by a front office person would be even more ironic, I guess you could say, or coincidental or not coincidental, I guess as the case may be. But, there's so many elements of the story, though. The idea that it could be a salary cap hit of $15 million per team. You're estimating then that what would that be? $450 million, $500 million as a total hit to the league if this doesn't work out. Are they trying to elicit sympathy from fans to say basically you need to pressure your teams into shutting up about human rights abuses in China so that your favorite team can go sign free agents? That almost makes me not want to watch the NBA this year if that's what the owners are trying to say. They're unrelated issues. The only thing that bothers me about any of this is that the NBA continues to kowtow. ESPN continues to kowtow. There was a story I saw on the Awful Announcing blog, which I love to read, about how ESPN had a graphic up this morning with it was a China-approved map of China that shows China with power in legislative control, sovereignty control over Taiwan, over disputed areas in the South China Sea, even over parts of India. ESPN's kowtowing to them. I don't want China money. I don't, and if it came down to this, I'm sure players, this is a progressive, generally a player group that's very progressive. But as a fan, if it comes down to we need China money to be able to pay players more, or we're going to have to pay players less, and you might not see your favorite players on your favorite teams, okay, because the situation in China is something that there's a right and a wrong, and you want to be on the right side of history here, and supporting a repressive totalitarian government in its efforts to repress the free speech rights of citizens who have long had sovereignty over themselves. That is the wrong side of history. And to put it down to you as a fan might not have your favorite free agent play for your favorite team next year. Again, I'm getting ready to push the button to order NBA League Pass. I'm now reconsidering that.
It's going to be really interesting because there's two guys that have even a more direct line to this. Two big name players, one being Klay Thompson and the other being Gordon Hayward. Their shoe deals are actually with a Chinese shoe company. And you're sitting here in the process, and because I don't want to seem like I'm second guessing, but we had one podcast a few months back where we just talked about PR issues all over the place, and people just couldn't get out of their own way. In this thought process of trying to say, hey, we're going to go to China and we're going to try to play these games, we're going to try to tap further into their basketball and their money. Is it possible to look back and say that something like this happening was inevitable? I mean, basically the game got played the other night, but for the most part it was played in the dark.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I understand, and again, I'm an on record Adam Silver fan. I'm sitting here in my mindset going, did we not see that something like this could possibly happen in this process?
No, I don't think I would agree with that, and here's why. I studied foreign policy in college. Obviously, I've done nothing with it. It's hard to make money as a foreign policy major, so and it's actually relatively easy to make it as a sports writer. So, but that said, I'll kind of tap into my academic studies back in the 90s of foreign policy, and I'm remembering, and of course I'm bringing up a name, and I'm not trying to be political when I say this. He happened to be president in the 90s. Bill Clinton's policy towards China in the 90s was actually, and I think you see this playing out in these kind of moves by the NBA. The idea was, the Chinese government of the early 90s, especially, people might remember Tiananmen Square. I think that was 1989. The democracy protests then, and how brutally the Chinese government responded to those democracy protests. I mean, there's the famous picture of literally one skinny man standing in front of a tank, waving his finger, basically saying, "I dare you to run me over." And he didn't get run over, but a lot of people were killed in those pro-democracy protests. So the policy in the Clinton years followed up, subsequently in a bipartisan manner until our current president has thrown everything in terms of conventional wisdom out the door. But for 25 years or so, our policy has been very consistent in that we treat these totalitarian regimes. The thinking is we would rather do business with them. Yes, the Chinese market is a huge market from an economic standpoint, 1 billion plus citizens, and in a country that is getting wealthier. They're not the average person in China still makes pennies on the dollar to what the average worker in the United States makes, but compared to 25 years ago, they're a lot stronger. There is a bigger middle class in China now, so there is more disposable income there now. So there is money to be made by American companies, Western companies in China now. So there's that aspect certainly, but the other aspect is if there's more Western business being done in countries like China, then there's more chance for Western influence in countries like China. When we talk about Western influence, we mean pro-democracy ideals. We need to be more open, and that's one area, a huge area where I've got a problem with our current president, where he's basically saying we don't need immigrants, we don't need to have influence outside, America first, all this kind of stuff. We need to be a world leader. I'm not saying we need to have military all over the place, and that's another area where I disagree with the current president. A lot of folks do. He thinks of American influence only as military influence. American influence is actually much more significant and much less costly if it's economic influence and cultural influence. And if the NBA, which it is, the NBA has more fans in China than it does in the United States, just because there's 4 times more people in China than there are in the United States. If we can use the NBA as a positive wedge, we can open up China. Think back to the 1970s. Now I'm really talking like a foreign policy wonk, but think of the ping pong diplomacy, the table tennis diplomacy employed by Richard Nixon. The idea of sending our table tennis national team over to China to play some exhibition matches against the Chinese table tennis national team. It was a slow opening of a door. In the 1980s, Ted Turner at the TBS network, they played those goodwill games again. U.S. versus Russia at the height of we had just boycotted their Olympics. They had just boycotted our Olympics in '86. The goodwill games on TBS, made for TV spectacle, but U.S. versus Russia in lots of sports, and it started opening doors. That's what is important here. We're making money, but we have a chance to open doors. And so, no, I'm all for these doors opening more. And yes, it's going to happen. It was whether it was Daryl Morey tweeting or an NBA player answering a question at a press conference, it was going to happen. And predictably, the Chinese government would respond the way it has. But I think in the end, the NBA is struggling right now, certainly through this issue from a PR standpoint. But I would not be surprised, Jerry, if we don't look back at this in 10 years and say that this was an opening towards the increasing openness of China and a key moment in our relations. Our current president is bound to screw it up more than he is bound to help it. But the long arc of history bends towards justice, and I think that we're going to see something positive out of this long term.
Okay, my last China-related question is this. I understand the tweet. I understand the uproar. Chris, I'm not a social media guy at all explain to me the logic of putting the tweet out and then deleting the tweet.
Well, the logic of putting the tweet out is, in this day and age, people tweet their thoughts, and actually, it was I thought, pretty innocuous statement. I mean, he's not anything close to being the only person to say, I stand with Hong Kong, in this matter. I mean, now the fact that he is Daryl Morey is the general manager of an NBA team, and in fact, a general manager of the NBA team that is the most popular team in China because Yao Ming starred for the Houston Rockets for a number of years. That's the significance there to China. If it was the general manager of the Memphis Grizzlies, I don't know that you get the same outcry. You get probably some outcry, but I don't think you get anything close to the same outcry. This is as if, Daryl Morey might as well be, Brian Cashman to Chinese basketball fans. If Chinese folks love baseball as much as they do basketball, he might as well be Coach K. If Duke was making a tour of China. I mean, Daryl Morey is that he has that status as the general manager of their most favorite team, their most popular team there. The logic behind deleting it is someone told him to. The ownership group in Houston, the Fertitta family. Hey, you stepped in it here, and you got to get back out of it. Not that, of course, in this day and age, deleting a tweet does anything, except for draw even more attention to it. But I would not have predicted anything close to the level of uproar from the Chinese government over a tweet as we've had here. And what that says to me, as much as anything, and in fact, this is the story of this story. Right, we're so focused on the trees that we're missing the forest here. Daryl Morey, in American society, a very insignificant figure. He's the general manager of an NBA team, not even a champion NBA team. He's just some guy who makes sometimes, in a lot of our opinions, bad decisions on personnel. I mean, he's got a team that's pretty good, but I mean, seriously, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony is going to be your solution. So he's an insignificant guy in the general discourse of the United States of America, but somehow he has this outsized role in the mind of the Chinese officials, to the point that tells you how sensitive Chinese officials are right now. They are feeling heat. If I was one of those pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, I'd say, wow, we are really getting to them. And for folks in America who probably only paid cursory, if any, attention to what's going on in Hong Kong the last several months, they've been shutting down airports, they've been shutting down highways. The pro-democracy protests have really stung the Chinese government, and the overwhelming response here. If I'm the average Chinese basketball fan, and there are lots of them, as we've talked about, there are more NBA fans in China than there are in the United States. I would wonder if because for months leading up to this exhibition tour, there was lots of attention in China about the fact this exhibition tour was coming up, and then all of a sudden it goes dark. If I'm the average Chinese citizen, does that tell me that maybe my government is a little worried about Hong Kong, and does that maybe plant some seeds in those folks' minds that something is amiss here? This is the Streisand effect times a billion. The Streisand effect in sociology is you're piqued by something that nobody's heard about, and then you make a big issue of it, and then all of a sudden everybody hears about it. The average Chinese citizen has never been exposed. Their state TV doesn't talk about Hong Kong. They don't talk about the bad news that makes the government look bad. And now all of a sudden they're not necessarily talking about this on Chinese state TV, but basketball games that you as a basketball fan in China wanted to watch are suddenly in the dark to you now. I wonder if that's not having a role that the Chinese government wishes they hadn't pushed that button. So those are my thoughts there, but I think that's a part of the whole thing where I think in 10 years we're going to look back on this and say this was a big moment for our interest in having people have a little bit more freedom of expression in a repressive society.
Very well stated there. And again, I'm glad we had a chance both earlier in the weekend this time, because this is the story that just won't quit telling itself right now. Hey, Chris, to wrap it up, instead of running through the all ACC preseason picks 1 through 15, I wanted to do something different. And I want to pick out one number that is mind-boggling to me and let you do the same. Now, they agreed that on our top 5. Now, Chris, my number is 14. I just don't see how Virginia Tech can be the 14th ranked basketball team in the ACC preseason. So I'm going to let you talk me to my senses there. What do you got?
Yeah, I don't see it either. They might be the 15th best team. They lost a lot. Yeah, they lost a lot. I mean, they lost everybody of significance. They didn't lose literally everybody, but they lost everybody who took them to the Sweet 16 last year. Not just Buzz. I mean, Buzz is a big part. I think Buzz got out of town knowing what was happening. Kind of like Jimbo Fisher got out of town at the right time at Florida State going to Texas A&M. But yeah, he got out of town at the right time because I mean it's just gonna be tough for them this year. The only guy they would have had back would have been Kerry Blackshear, who he would have been such a focal point of opposing coaches' defensive strategies. He knows that if he has any shot of playing the NBA, it can't be getting double and triple teamed 32 times at Virginia Tech. And so, Mike Young, it's going to be tough for him this year. You lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you lose Blackshear, you use Justin Robinson. 2 of those 3 of the NBA. Blackshear, to me, is an NBA talent. You also lose veteran guys like Ahmed Hill, Ty Outlaw, guys who, glue type guys from your team. You've got the guys you got back. I don't want to overlook them, but Wabisa Bidi is a guy that stepped in and played a lot of point guard last year when Robinson went down to injury. He's got experience, but he's a sort of replacement level player. To use pro baseball terms. So is Isaiah Wilkins. I mean, and that's the experience you got back. It's going to be tough for Tech this year. And what Mike Young has to sell is he's going to sell. We're going to work hard. He's going to sell to recruits. There's playing time available for you if you come here, and he's recruiting well for future classes already. So there could be some talent coming in. It's going to be important for him though because people commit, but they don't sign until November in basketball. He's going to have to, and there's also the second signing period in April after the season's over. He's going to have to keep those. He's had a couple of recruiting wins for future classes already, but he's going to have to keep them in the fold. He's going to have to show they're not going to go 500 this year. They're not overall, including with their weak non-conference schedule. They might win 2 or 3 ACC games this year. He's going to have to show them more than that. He's going to have to show that we've got a scrappy team and we're going to work hard, and you can come here and work hard and get some playing time. It's going to be tough for Tech, though. I really think it's going to be a really, really tough year for his first year.
Okay, so returning the favor, I'm sure you've looked at the poll. You got the vote on the poll. Give me your one number that you think is the most inaccurate.
6 out of 7. How about that one? Duke, for the 6th year out of the last 7, picked first in the conference. And it's hard to say, because we talked about this Tuesday before we knew the results of this. I think that your top 4, you could go any way. I think any of those 4 could be your number 1. Any of those 4 could be your number 4. I think there's a clear demarcation between 4 and 5. But I think what you saw there was, and Scott said this on the podcast yesterday, Duke and Carolina were picked 1 and 2. Go figure that would be the case, right? The people who cover the ACC on a nightly basis, the way those events are staffed, there's a lot of Carolina-based writers there, and a lot of national-based writers there. If anybody were to be pissed off the most about that, it actually wouldn't be defending national champion Virginia, because yes, we lost a lot of guys. It should be Louisville. If you're anybody out there who should be angry about Duke and Carolina being 1 and 2 in this preseason, which means nothing. It's preseason voting. It's what it is, especially this year. But Duke and Carolina have so little back from last year. Virginia has so little back from last year. Louisville's got everybody back from last year. They've got the most talent back from last year. It's insulting to me that you see Duke and Carolina slotted in because it's laziness on the part of sports writers. That's all you can equate it to. And again, I'm saying this, and I'm saying it kind of passionately, and I'm also saying that any of those 4 can win it. Any of those 4 could be 4th. So it is what it is. But, man, just every once in a while, do some research is all I would suggest to these people. And if you did research and you were voting, you probably would vote Louisville number 1. even though, I don't know that they're going to win it any more than I know that Duke or Carolina or Virginia is going to win it. I can make a case for any of those four. But when I saw the 1-2, I just said, man, work harder than that, guys, or just don't even show up or don't count their votes.
It was interesting because I felt pretty good about the fact that you and I had a conversation and that you could make a case for the top four being the top four, and we felt that Florida State was a natural fit. And it's a situation where, again, if you just break down the number of people covering the game per city, I'm sure there wasn't a room full of Louisville writers there.
That's right.
That would be my first guess. But it's funny. It's funny because I get asked a lot why I talk so passionately about Duke football versus Duke basketball. Duke basketball doesn't need me to be your talking piece. Hey, it's just a unique situation, and I was sitting there. I honestly, if it had been me, I would have said UNC Duke, but it doesn't make it any better. And my question mark for Louisville is I don't know how they're going to get past the number of tough losses they had last year. I do think they're going to get there. I think they got a great coach. I think they've got a Louisville coach who's part of the. You see the things again. I'm tapped into this because of my brother. The things that he's doing in the community, the things that Pitino didn't have to do because he was Rick Pitino. This guy's likable. He's gonna win. The fact that he won as much as he did by hodgepodging a team together. I'm not sure that 2 years down the road that they're not toe to toe with everybody. This year, I think they're going to play pretty well, but they think they're going to have to win some of those games that they couldn't finish off last year. But it was one of those things when I saw as a thing that stuck out more to me. I know Virginia Tech's going to struggle. I just don't know that Boston College and Georgia Tech are going to beat them too. It'll be interesting, but they'll have a lot of fun stuff to keep track of. I know you're just hours away. Have you figured out your plan to watch both games?
Yeah, my plan is to clone myself, and that's not going to work. I've done some research, and that's just not going to work. The plan is going to be to annoy myself because, and unfortunately, much more so annoy my wife because she's going to watch both games with me, and I'm going to be flipping back and forth, and I don't know. It's because I was hopeful, like. Last week I thought the Friday game started at 7 o'clock, or maybe it was the Duke Virginia Tech game started at 7 o'clock a couple weeks ago. And so I thought maybe there's a sliver of a chance that this game, the UVA-Miami game, will start at 7. At least I can watch like the first quarter and a half without having to have any distractions. Maybe halftime will hit at a good time. The football game, the TV broadcast starts at 8, which means kickoff's probably 8:05 or 8:08. The first pitch, the baseball game's 8:08. So. It's going. I mean, my right wrist, my thumb, let's see, what hand would I use there? It would be the thumb and probably the first two fingers, like my fastball fingers. They're going to be exhausted tonight. I need to get some rest. Maybe put some ice on them because and maybe one or the other will get comfortably ahead. Go Hoos. Let's get a couple touchdowns early, get a couple pick sixes or something like that, get up 21-0 second quarter, and then you can watch a little bit more baseball, vice versa. If the Nats can score 10 in the top of the first, I mean, something like that would be nice. But since I say that out loud, Jerry, what's going to happen is it's going to come down to a overtime football game, and about the 13th inning, the baseball game will end. And if I had hair, it will be standing on the top of my head by the time the night's over. That's most likely what's going to happen, Jerry.
I saw last night was a challenge for me with 4 different events going on that I was trying to keep track of. And, the WNBA, the Houston Astros playing Syracuse and then Daniel Jones versus the Patriots. But, hey, I'm hoping you're going to have a good time tonight. I'm hoping that both the Who's and the Nats can take care of business. And I'll be looking forward to going through it all again come Monday morning.
Yeah, the hard part for me is tonight it's just 2 teams that you live and die with, and they're both playing at the same time. So one might help you live and the other might help you die. But either way, a lot of fun. That's why we love sports. It gives us a good diversion. Thank you, Jerry, for your time. Thank you to the listeners out there as well. And thanks for joining us. And, yeah, Jerry and I will get back together on Monday and kind of wrap up the weekend. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody.